Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, I welcome you all to the special lecture. This is part of the second part of the webinar series that we are holding. And my name is Sahib Kaur, and I am pursuing PhD from Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies. We have amongst us Professor Kailash C. Baral, who will share his insights today on critical humanities and folk culture. We welcome you, sir. We welcome you and thanks for joining us today. Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce Professor Baral. Professor Baral superannuated from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad in 2019 after a long career spanning over 41 years. A higher administrative grade professor of English and India Studies and former Pro Vice Chancellor of English and Foreign Languages University. He is currently the Vice Chairman of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, under Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Professor Baral has authored, edited, and co-edited 10 books and has about 50 publications in national international journals and anthologies. His work, Theory After Derrida, was relaunched by Routledge in South Asian edition in 2018. His edited volume, Earth Songs, Stories from Northeast India, published by Sahitya Academy, is translated into Hindi, Kannada, Bengali languages. This volume is prescribed in the syllabus of Northeast Studies of many universities. He was a member of Sahitya Academy's National Jury for Bal Sahitya Puruskar in 2014. He was a recipient of Narendra Pradhan Award and the British Council Fellowship. Presently, he is a visitor's nominee to many universities. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Thanks for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Uh, okay, is this the format that is okay? All right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Actually, this is a pleasure to give a talk for the Department of Modern Indian Languages. I have a kind of affinity with the department for many years. And I thank Professor Patnaik for his abiding affection towards me because retired people are hardly remembered, but he remembers. And actually, that is why he's the right person to actually to be a teacher of culture, because a very important part of culture is memory, cultures of memory. If we start forgetting people and relationships and all that, at some stage we may start forgetting our cultures and ourselves also. And there is a problem with forgetting, because the foundation of Indian culture is that, because you can hardly afford to forget. Look at this dynamics, that this is a culture built on memory or memorizing or memory bias. Now, having said that, I was looking at the schedule, and I was also looking at some of the papers that are going to be presented or already presented. And the topic itself is very challenging. Multidisciplinary approaches to folk life. First part is okay. Second part is very interesting, challenges and perspectives. I think what Professor Patnaik has told me, you are going to have some 9 days webinar or more than that. And obviously you will certainly get some perspectives at the end of the day. I don't know, because challenges are many. And There are cultural challenges, civilizational challenges, pedagogic challenges. There are quite a number of challenges. And I think Delhi University is the right place. People like you and your colleagues, the research scholars, you people should actually find out how to overcome some of these challenges. My talk at the outset would be maybe that is what I feel a little abstract today. I will still try to simplify myself as much as possible because the timing is only 40 minutes. And obviously, I have to squeeze in a lot of things because I have a lot of things to talk about. uh, Actually, I was looking at some of the papers listed to be presented, and I found the word alternative has been used uh, in some presentations. You see, there is a kind of strong feeling for having alternative approaches, whatever that may mean. And therefore, when we talk about alternative ways, alternative means, or alternative approaches, there is something wrong with the existing approaches or existing theories, or there is some kind of discomfort with that. Now, therefore, what happens is that this discomfort maybe because of either we don't understand what is multi or cross disciplinarity, or somewhere we do not select the type of or useful theoretical aspects to study some object, or there may be inherently something wrong because all the theories come from the West. Do these theories uh, very meaningfully help us to interpret our own cultures? That is $1 million question actually, because we have not been able to develop our theories, and even if we have done something that has not received a kind of global acceptance as the Western theories have received. Now, therefore, there is a problem. There is a problem at hand, and therefore, I think the a topic for the webinar is very topical in the sense that what do we do with the theories, or have the theories come to passe that we have to think of some alternatives, because in particular knowledge production in humanities and social sciences are facing some kind of crisis. Because if you look at the higher education scenario, because of the techno scientific turn, what has happened? Humanities and social sciences are embattled disciplines. So nobody bothers about them, first of all. And second thing is, they are also struggling against their own methods of inquiry. You see, there is a problem, there is an internal problem with most of these disciplines. There is a struggle with their own modes of inquiry. And there are certain other things that has also happened to the disciplines, like uh, uh, as I have already told you earlier, that the social sciences in India, or social sciences research in India, we are still following uh, European frameworks of inquiry, and that has actually created something that it is a repeat art, that we are repeating the same thing over and over again, and therefore the results are very predictable, very predictable. Now, this is also another way of looking at, because the dissertations that come out from social science departments, particularly I know of from Northeastern region, Northeast universities, I find you can, looking at a thesis, you would know that what is going to the outcome of that thesis. Now, therefore, I think at some stage there is a serious problem of methodology as well. Uh, now, in the process, larger issues of structures, systems, and processes of cultural life get obfuscated uh, without meaningful production of knowledge. This is what is the scenario that I have already told you. From definitions of cultures to interpretive methods of cultural study, the West has dominated the field, starting with E. B. Edward B. Teller's 1871 work Primitive Culture to Clifford George's 1973 work The Interpretation of Cultures, to Clifford George, Interpretation of Cultures, to others and other works such as Raymond Williams, Understanding of Culture from a Materialist-led orientation, in works such as Culture and Society, Sociology of Culture, and a very different type of work coming from a professor of English, James Clifford. The title is very tantalizing. Predicament of Culture. The Predicament of Culture. Then we come to the so-called famous contemporary Center for Cultural Studies of Birmingham University. And you have such scholars like Stuart Hall contributing to critical race theory and a representation of cultures, and literacy cultures of England, that is Hogarth, who both of them have founded Hogarth's work. You find, and also you go to Frankfurt School, Benjamin and others, they are also talking about culture, cultural production, and all those things. And that is the beginning of critical theory. And coming to Derrida, Foucault, then gender theories or feminist theories, colonial, post-colonial theory, like this, there is the endless theories that is on march, actually. And each and every theory also talks about culture. By the way, culture is not outside of theory. Indeed, theories are built around culture or some aspect of cultures. Now, this is the theoretical position or scenario. And when we talk about disciplines, as you know, there are quite a number of disciplines. They also do study of cultures like cultural anthropology, sociology, that is sociology of culture. History also has a branch called cultural history. Like that, many of the disciplines, they do also contribute what we call cultural studies. And of course, of late, there are exclusive cultural studies departments. There is folklore department, there are also cultural studies departments. Now, therefore, the disciplinary, look at, I'm talking about two, three things at the same time. One is I'm talking about the theoretical developments in the West. And second thing is I'm talking about the disciplines that are specifically engaged with studies of culture, with their own objectives, with their own mandates, and with their own methods of inquiry. And in most cases, and there is another thing that is coming from the positivist school of philosophy in the West, like starting with Comte, then we have Max Weber and Durkheim. There is another line of thinkers, those who have contributed to the study of culture. Now, what has happened that there are two things that has emerged, particularly in social sciences, for the study of culture. One is the coming from anthropology, sociology kind of background, is fieldwork model, and the other one is empirical. And you put it, you can change the language and say quantitative, qualitative research, this thing, that thing, and all these things. Now, these models, unfortunately, have not been changed, modified, or anything. Whereas, cultures have thrown off newer ideas and have actually, cultural study scholars have come up with new evidence to look at cultures differently. Uh, Having said this, with all these, why do we then face a crisis? This is a huge question, and one is required to do some sort of heavy lifting of sorts in providing some answer. Having made these preliminary observations, let me start with two very commonly used expressions. One is each culture is an autonomous universe, or what we call cultural universe. That each culture is a universe in the sense that if you break down this statement, that if a culture is a whole, each of its parts conform to that whole, and each part also carry the cultural signature of uniqueness. That is the cultural universe or cultural world, whatever we may call it. And there is another statement. Here you find when we say autonomous cultural universe, you find as if it has nothing to do with other cultures. It is sui generis, it is independent of other formations, other cultures, but that is not true. The other statement or other common use is no culture is an island. That means culture is constantly negotiating, borrowing ideas, this thing, that thing. And both work in their own dynamics. Culture is a universe, culture is unique, or it is an autonomous universe. And similarly, culture is no island, because there is always a kind of cultural exchange, negotiation, all kind of things are happening. And therefore, the cultural formation, if we talk about cultural formation, you will find each culture has certain things unique. Let us say the episteme of a culture. What is the foundation of a culture? The episteme of a culture may be unique, but the practice of the culture undergo changes. The practice of the culture undergo changes. And precisely for that reason, culture has to borrow ideas, adjust, readjust with the changing times, or new things come in, or sometimes some cultures are overwhelmed by outside forces, historical forces. And obviously, cultures have no choices but to, reorganize itself. The culture has to reorganize itself. Like from a tribal society, when the society, wholesale or totally get converted to a new religion, then the whole lifestyle changes. The whole lifestyle changes. And these are historical forces. And that is where, this the change or tradition and change or mutation in cultural forms are a continuous process. That is the point I am trying to say. Now, if culture is a continuous process of, development or, uh, progress or whatever we call it, uh, then can we consider a culture as a static? See, can we consider anything in cultural form as a static? The argument that I have actually forwarded is that if culture is dynamic, subject to changes and adjustments, then culture cannot be considered as something static. Now, what has happened here is a contradiction. This is my view. Maybe others may not agree with me. Here is this is my view that when we talk about folk life or folk culture, an understanding grows that as if it is fixed in time. There is out there something called folk. You can go and discover it, and this is a problem. This is a problem because folk culture, which gradually also changes, because nowadays we used to lament that a lot of folk practices have disappeared, this thing, that thing. That has to disappear because cultures keep on changing. Cultures keep on changing. The point is, that should we understand, consider, cultural practices, forms as something static? My point is that we should not. We should not. Because why we should not? Because we can always revisit the past. You see, you have text to revisit the past, you have other things to revisit the past, and you have, as I told you, memories which could be used to revisit the past. And there are other things in culture, even if we don't understand it, we do it because these are called traditions. And sometimes it is said that Indian traditions, how old, thousands of years of old, but they are still living traditions because we are still practicing. And we are not trying to figure out what they mean actually. We don't rationalize it, we simply do it. Okay. Now that is another way of looking at cultural continuity. It is not that cultures do not change, they do change, but at the same time there is a kind of cultural continuity is also there. uh, Now what has happened is that uh, we have a clear division when we talk about cultural forms and formations. One is the way we come to understand culture or study different aspects of culture. As I have told you that the Western theories or the Western practices have dominated the field. Now, we are also doing the same thing because our education is very much, we have adopted the Western way of education and we are still doing that. Now, what happens is that should we or should we not use or apply the Western theories to study non-Western cultures? I'm using a broad concept, non-Western, not specific, non-Western cultures. You see, there are a huge difference, theoretically and otherwise, that our study of non-Western cultures cannot be similar with the way the Westerners study their own cultures and other cultures. And as you know, there is a huge history about studying the non-Western cultures, because the non-Western cultures, when we talk about, we have historical forces which need to be also reflected upon, like colonialism. Alongside colonialism, also conversion, or bringing in new religion or Western religion. And these are forces like Christianity and colonialism are very strong forces in the life of the cultural life of the colonies. And not only the mainstream cultural life of the colonies, but also the unique cultures, isolated, unique, secluded cultures, what unfortunately we have come to identify as a tribal culture, because I don't like this qualifier as a tribal, because tribal also is a kind of stereotype. It is not thinking of fixing culture in time and space, but when you use a qualifier, it's a tribal culture, it's a hill culture, therefore you are stereotyping that culture. Therefore some assumptions are derived from that, thinking that they are not culturally very much developed and all that. uh, Therefore I would suggest, and initially it was the same thing when the Museum of Man started. And one of the descriptions was given there was, this is Museum of a Man, not of a colored man, not of tribal man, not of this. And incidentally, this very description came later on, like a race, a tribe, all these things came later on. And this is actually a product of Project of Enlightenment, because under Project of Enlightenment you clarify and classify, and therefore it is not only knowledge is hierarchical, even humans cultures are also hierarchical, because, and this is also, along with this also came Eurocentrism, that Europe is, civilizationally, historically, Europe is more advanced than others. And along with that, the middle of 19th century, the new disciplines that emerged, like anthropology and sociology, as you know, the motto of anthropology is to study primitive culture. You know, any culture that anthropology studies automatically becomes primitive. You see, this is a very strange qualifier. Uh, and this is where you will find that there are certain kind of things that happen actually when we think of cultural studies per se. Uh, when we talk about the folk, the impression, as I have already told you, is fixed in time and space. And what happens, some cases I have already explained how things are stereotyped, but a set of vocabularies, you will find it interesting that a set of vocabularies have emerged, particularly, or they are very, very dominant when you talk about cultural studies, like oral written, primitive civilized, objective rational, subjective experiential, material scientific, and belief, whatever you call prejudices, blind beliefs, whatever belief systems, memory recorded, heathen faithful, paganism, monotheism, naked, clothed, clean, unclean. These are the vocabularies that have become dominant, particularly in the context of cultural studies. Now, these words, if you find, they're oppositional, but they also carry some kind of negative connotations, as if the negatives are attributed to non-European cultures, sorry, non-Western cultures. That is one way of looking at it. Another thing is, if you look at all these, look at starting with the Renaissance, the whole, very a huge concept of humanism and all these kind of stuff, anthropocentric worldview, you will find the very definition of a human, the very definition of a human, as it is in the West, is not the same in non-Western cultures. The definition of the human is not the same. Second thing is, I will of course talk about critical humanities. There I will elaborate a little bit on that. If you look at these pairs of words, or this dialectical formation that has come from the West, you will find that some of the ideas do not actually hold the way we consider or the way we investigate those ideas using Western theories. Because in the West, you cannot separate, theoretical developments, disciplinary studies, and religion. Therefore, when I say, these two things you take, the word primitive came from anthropology, and the word heathen came from Christianity. Actually, there is no much difference between the heathen and the primitive, because both are unclean. You see, cleanliness is also a term that has come from the church, clean and unclean. You see, not pure and impure, not holy and impure, not in that sense holy. Holy is not used, holy is used in different sense. Now, if you look through these words, particularly, that is why I'm insisting on cultural vocabularies, because do we understand these words in their real context and in their changed contexts, or in their changing context? And that would be very exciting if you try to look at how these expressions evolved. Now, see, how primitive is explained. Primitive means hunter-gatherers, no organized religion. Maybe they have a language which is not that much developed, limited vocabulary, this thing, that thing, and they don't have any concept of the house or this thing. They may be staying in some kind of makeshift things, and their world. There is another word that comes from history here, that the people, those who are primitive, are also barbaric. You see, now once they are barbaric, they have not developed the sense of rationality, judgment, what is right, what is wrong. Therefore, what happens? They exist outside the so-called moral world, the so-called moral frame of as Westerners consider the moral frame of the world. Now, if you talk about primitives or the primitive people, their form of worship, you see, the most beautiful part is that the early humans were very close to nature. And whatever they were scared of or they were worshipful of, those are entities of nature. Okay. Now, this is the point that they were worshipping multiple kind of entities or idols or something like that. Then, therefore, they became pagan. They became pagan. And if you look at the definition of heathen, it is very interesting in the sense that heathen is one who doesn't actually accept the God of a Bible. That is fine. But at the same time, it is also extended. Heathen are those who are not members of Abrahamic religion, like Judaism or Yehudi and Islam, Yehudi, Christian, and Islam. And anybody else, those who do not belong to these three religions, are called heathen, are called heathen. And paganism is also another construct that also evolved during the same time. And obviously, the whole study study of culture from the framework of religious practices of these people were primitive, heathen, pagan, colonized. You take anything, you take any way you go on extending the negative, the words, oral, unwritten cultures, no archival method of storing their information. All these things can continue, and this is one way of looking at it. Now, what is it then? What is the epistemic structure around which these negative connotations developed? I have talked about Eurocentrism, but at the same time, there is a what I would call Christian anthropology. That Christian anthropology is developed around not only heathenism, but also another very important concept which is central to European thinking or European thought, that is called ontotheology. As I was talking about, humans are not defined in the same way as in the West. You see, in the West, what has happened, this concept you take, monotheistic God, there is only one God, and this God actually defines us. Therefore, ontotheology, that the ontos, the beginning, is actually defined by religion. Now, what does it mean? It means that as humans, we are defined not by ourselves, but by religion. Therefore, human being, I'm using the word being, the being is defined by theology, by religion, and that religion is centered around a singular God. Okay. Now, this is the foundational principle of Western thinking, and other things come later on. Yeah. Now, around this, what has evolved in the Western thought is concepts which are sometimes not applicable to non-Western kind of cultures, is universalism. See, universalism is one concept. And there is another concept like ideology. There are various shades of ideology. I'm not going into that, but as a kind of concept, ideology, that one system, one rule, whether you call it capitalism or Marxism, whatever you call it, they are very unified, integrated kind of thing. There is no question of plurality available there. But the non-Western cultures are very plural in their approach. That is, I will now give you an example, one beautiful example of, say in India, we are a pluralistic society. We also worship many gods. We are rightly the pagans, actually, of the West. And as if we don't have any system of belief or a very, you can say, evolved architecture of spirituality. That would be contested if we are following the Western theories. Now, this is where you take like tribal cultures, you will find the epistemic structure, or some people may call it the worldview of the tribal societies, is structured totally differently. See, you have a god. Sorry, there is no word God in tribal societies. There may be gods, but in some other name, but there is no God as it is understood, let us say, in Western culture, or let us say, even in the mainstream Hindu religion. They have a concept of a creator. See, there is a creator, and the creator is not necessarily God. He is a creator. And after the creator, their daily life, after the creator created and he's forgotten. People don't bother about him. They are constantly bothered about the spirit world. The spirit world is most important for tribal belief system. And there are two types: the ancestral spirits, with whom they always have some kind of conversation or communication all the time, because they happen to be good spirits, always protecting you, helping you, and all that. And there are bad spirits, those who cause disease, sickness, destruction, these kind of things. Now, in this world, there is no foundational principle that everything happens because of God. God is omnipresent. God is this, God is that. And our life is controlled by God. No, life is controlled by spirits. And here, the spirit world, as they are various, for everything there is a spirit. Animals do have spirits, like tiger spirits, lion spirit, tree spirit. There are spirits everywhere. Bird spirit and a rice spirit. Paddy also has a spirit. Okay. Now, therefore, the spirits are numerous, like Hindu gods and goddesses. And here I was reading something. I came across something very fantastic. I want to share with you. That somebody was telling that the Hindu gods are too many, and they have created idols, but they are not idols, they are ideas. Therefore, if you substitute the idols with ideas, look at the whole horizon of thinking. That Ganesh is the idea for Vidya, Saraswati is the idea for music or creative writing, Durga is the idol for, or idea, substituted as idea for Shakti or power or energy. Look at that. And that is, this gentleman is saying, Hindus were never worshipping idols, they were worshipping ideas. Look at how powerful this statement is. And I will just take it to the tribal concept of worship or rituals or whatever they do. This could be considered as, because animism, it is called animism. But you can also say behind animism is also one thing that is very important. These are ideas. These are ideas they're worshipping. Like rain is also an idea. Without rain, what happens? With too much rain, what happens? No, therefore, idea is not in the sense of literal meaning, but idea is an entity, a presence which affects your life, and you need to be, attentive to those ideas, whether you worship or you don't worship. Now, this is the way of looking at the pagan world. Pagan world is very rich in a plurality of ideas and idols. Okay. Now, there are some other basic concepts that are also contested and done. One such important concept is oral cultures, oral societies, and ordinarily it would mean that in oral societies, in oral cultures, or orality itself is defined of absence of writing. Where there is no writing, it is oral. Okay. Now, that is a very limited way of looking at orality, because orality as a kind of a discourse is much more than or beyond the very idea of writing. Writing is a very recent invention, and writing is actually a technology. It is a technology of a paper, pen, printing press, publication of books. These are all technologies. And orality is not based on technologies, except maybe one technology or the process. I would say it is a process, it is not technology, that is memory, memorizing things. Now, within this culture of writing, what has happened? It is not only the technologies of writing, along with that, also other things have happened, like testimony. You see, what courts accept, the written evidence is more important than oral evidence. And it is substituted almost all the important actions, because earlier what happened in orality, that if you give your word, you are bound by a truth. We have devalued that your words are not important. You show me whether somebody has given you in writing. Okay. Now these substitutions has happened, and there is another claim that writing culture has developed what we call archival culture. Knowledge is stored in the libraries, in the museums. You can keep archival sites everywhere. It has come to digital culture now. You see, you can digitize so many things, you can store it. And this is one thing which always we miss: who was storing, which was storing the oral cultural products. It is the mind. The human mind was storing everything. Therefore, memory was the archive. Memory was the archive. Now, at one stage, I have said that the concept of a human is not similar as in the West and in non-West cultures. Similarly, the concept of storage is not similar. Storage of knowledge or whatever is not similar in the West and in the non-West, or in the written cultures and in the oral cultures. In the oral culture, it is memory. And memory is a very, very significant thing, that what is called mnemocultures. Memory itself is a culture. Memory itself is a culture, and it is a very signifying culture. Okay. Now, I will not go into that. This is also another aspect of human, the human oral, and having the archive of the memory. And you will find there is another expression that is being used, that as we talk about tradition and practices, as they have been handed down to us from generation to generation. See, that is when we do folk studies, we say it is handed down from generation to generation. Now, this handing down from generation to generation is a circularity. From one generation comes, one generation disappears or dies out. Therefore, it moves in a circular system. Therefore, this kind of a memory cycles or cycling of a memory is not linear. See, linear is the written culture. It started in 1932. After that, the same thing is reported, this thing, that thing. This is a linearity. And in a cyclical and linear understanding of things, and particularly epistemic knowledge systems, you will find what we call space and time. That has to be looked into, in what way in Western cultures space and time is considered, and in what way it is in non-Western cultures it is considered. This is another fundamental thing starting with ontotheology, with the time and space, memory, and recorded or written cultures. This is where you find. I want to give you an illustration here that there is a tribe or there is a group of people I always call communities. There is a community called the Konyaks in Nagaland. And among the Konyaks, there is a practice. I think most of the people, these tribal communities, they have the practice of tattoo, body color, body painting or whatever you call it, tattoo. And the Konyaks are very fond of tattoo. And there are various forms of tattoo, like a man who has taken a head, he will have a tattoo on some part of his body, and a woman married, she will also have a tattoo to indicate that she is married. It's not only that a married woman is only identified by sindoor in Indian culture, but there are other cultures, they also mark their women that she is married. Those kind of practices are also there. And there is a unique practice in which you will find that the whole life cycle of a person, particularly of a woman, is actually indicated or signified. This is a tattoo on the ankle of a woman. Okay. Now, how does this tattoo progresses? The tattoo progresses along with the age of the girl. At the beginning, there will be a small, kind of a mark, because it has to be a round tattoo. Some part of that round, that circle, marked. And when she reaches the age of puberty or marriageable age, the tattoo will be expanded. Now, what happens from one tattoo to the other tattoo? It is indicated that till the second part of the tattoo is done, the girl is still a girl. She is not a woman, and she would be treated. It is expected that all the members of the community should treat her as a girl. Anything they do to her in violation of her status as a child or as a girl is subject to punishment. One. Second thing is how this thing moves simultaneously. A girl evolves to a woman. Only then she can be escorted by boys. Only then she can receive offers of marriage. Before that, nobody can do it. Okay. Now, after she is married, the cycle is completed, the circle is completed, and at the same time, an inverted V is carved on her chest. Now, I was talking about being naked. You must have known a famous book by Hemmerdorf, an anthropologist who has written a book called Naked Nagas. Naked Nagas. You see, clothing and nakedness are cultural concepts. I may be putting on a small cloth, but I think I'm clothed. Somebody may be wrapping up 7 layers of clothes, may think that the person is not sufficiently clothed. Because this is where it is important. One is life cycle is given in that tattoo, number one. Number two is it has a legal implication that if you have not looked at the tattoo and done something, you have violated the rule. Therefore, it also invokes law, punishment. Along with that, it also invokes social status. After somebody is married, what happens to that lady? Now, this is, at this point, I want to tell you there are 3 things which are involved here. One is body marking through tattoo. I would call it writing, engraving. Engraving has been part of oral cultures. Therefore, saying that oral cultures, absence of writing, engraving is one form of writing. This is stone works and paintings, and even body things, body tattoo and all these things. And coding, the legal part of it, the coding of cultural concepts on the body. Now, what happens here is that the body becomes a cultural text. The body becomes embodiment of culture, because whatever we have internalized, and whatever is being expressed outside on the body. Therefore, body provides a kind of representation beyond race, with your dress, the way you conduct yourself. This is where the cultural body is very, very important. Cultural body is very, very important. Now, if you read the ethnographies written by Britishers and anthropologists and all that, you don't come across this kind of interpretations, because how the body becomes a text, cultural text, it encodes the law, and it also has a legitimacy of this particular body exhibits, uh, because it's legitimized, because the who does the tattoo, from where the authority of the tattoo is drawn. It is the chief's wife who does it. Look at, no other person can do it. Therefore, the tattoo on the body of the girl is legitimized by an authority. Okay. Now, these are having, if you just break down this symbolism, you will find that this particular thing, because I will give you another example. Those of you who have read Chinua Achebe's book, Arrow of God, Okonoko killed one of his clansmen, and he had to go for exile for 7 years. And you will be surprised to know that this is a practice among the Angamis of Nagaland. Now, what is happening regarding justice? When you say primitive, that means they don't have any sense of justice. They don't have any sense of moral order. But here, justice is not only encoded on the body, which is legitimized a kind of authority of the society, but justice is also self-regulated. That in most tribal societies, you will find if you have committed a crime, the punishment you also know. And voluntarily you have to do. Nobody will send the police to your house, arrest you, put you, and there will be a judge. These things came from the West. And where you will find you pay to very, heavily to famous lawyers, actually, you can win the case. But justice is self-regulated. Look at this. See, this is a culture where justice is self-regulated. You know the rule. If you violate a young girl who has not reached the stage, the punishment is there. If you kill a clansman, then the punishment is there. 7 years, you will self-exile. Nobody will come to your house. You have to disappear before the morning from the house. Now, these are the things which actually constitute what I call, the cultural universe. And this is where we need to understand, because for understanding culture, I think I have taken a lot of time. Anyway, I'll just conclude. This is because this talk is inconclusive. I can never conclude it, but I'm giving you some examples here and there. And I will briefly talk about critical humanities, otherwise it will not be complete. Now, these are the things that critical humanities looked into. It is not critical humanities is a new theory or something like that. It specifies in culturally how are you defined as human, and what are the actions, why do you do what you do. And I would say that we do things because we have, we intend to do it. And I will just read out that paragraph in what way critical humanities could be, useful for, doing some kind of meaningful research. Critical humanities may provide us a strategic selection of parameters to engage with the local and the contingent, while examining the cultural tools of interpretation available to any culture. In questioning the critical frames of old humanity, such as ideology, universalism, primitivism, rational, scientific, etc., the task of critical humanities is to prepare us to develop a critique that is self-reflexive and transformative. For example, considering the worship of multiple idols, I have already talked about that. The endeavor may help us in developing an alternative theoretical to model to non-foundational and non-ontotheological structures of knowledge. At the heart of Indian indigenous critical thinking is to move beyond binaries and accept a plurality with multiple sources of origin, for our views on man and his origin are set on an inexhaustible plurality. And the fundamental concern of critical humanities, starting with what makes us a human, as to humans, what we intend to do and why, will provide us an enabling opportunity to make productive contributions to indigenous knowledge systems. I think I need another lecture to talk on critical humanities, and today it was not enough. Anyway, I have just given a broad outline of my talk. It is not a real talk on anything, it's an outline of a talk. And for your information, there is only one book that has come out from India called Critical Humanities from India. And this is a book edited by D. Venkatarao and published by Routledge, England, UK. And those of you who are interested, there is an assortment of articles there. But you can still look into this book, that how critical humanities could be one of the ways of finding a new perspective. That's it. Thank you very much for your patience, and now I am ready for any questions.
Thank you very much, sir, for elaborating so much on folk culture and critical humanities. It was such a nourishing presentation for all of us. It nourished our critical faculties. And I think a lot of our scholars and participants would be keen on asking questions because it was so much intriguing at the same time. Uh, can we just have questions now in the chat box? So we have one question from Nandita ma'am. She says the discipline of folklore is pretty old in India. How is that our scholars have not evolved any theory to study Indian folklore?
She should ask them. I am not a folklorist. uh, no, it is not that actually. The problem is the disciplinary protocols, what we follow. See, it is not that people didn't want to break away and do certain things of their own. Because if it could be done in the field of music, see, you have classical, these modern, then fusion. Why not have different kind of methodologies? That is why I had my own problem with this multidisciplinarity. See, it sounds very good. It sounds very good. But we are not in social sciences doing multidisciplinarity as it is done in sciences, let us say, for example. Like if you look at a discipline, what they call hybrid disciplines like biochemistry. See, here the primary study remains biology. Chemistry is an intervention. What actually helps the biological aspect. It is not a pure chemistry studies or a physical chemistry and all those kind of things. It is not there. It is a selection. Therefore, what happens if folklore has to develop a kind of interdisciplinary study, it must strengthen what is its core. See, what is folk life? You see, today I was looking at all these words, conceptual categories. Have we, because I'm still struggling, because I don't come across any clear-cut definition of these things. Because folk is always with us. But the moment you start doing studies on folk, as if folk is something outside of us, that is the whole problem. Okay. No, it is not only with the folklore. I think most of the disciplines, I think you organize something about disciplinary protocols and pedagogy or critical pedagogy. I can give a talk. I'm volunteering myself. See, we have a lot of problem at the discipline. See, we have Now you go to the universities, you find most of the departments are doing the same thing. See, you have a department of cultural studies, you have a department of folklore in the same university.
Right.
Then you have, English departments are also, they have changed their names. Department of English and Cultural Studies.
Cultural studies, yeah.
That everybody is doing cultural studies. And that is the whole problem. Because everybody is doing cultural studies, whatever they call it. That is the problem.
So I was also wondering if we are looking in the Indian domain or non-Western domains through Western theories. Is it because, is it only due to the unavailability of theories here, or have we exhausted everything that was available here, or is it something else?
So you say, let us not look at theory per se. This word, I have problem with this word.
Right.
Actually, what happens is each culture has tools of interpretation,
True.
tools of objectifying, rationalizing things. And that is where, a farmer can predict when it is going to rain, when it is not going to rain. See, what has happened is we have concentrated on the manifested, whatever is revealed, whatever is seen, never try to get insight. Okay. Now, this is where I appreciate that expression of Clifford George, thick description. What are the layers? There are layers and layers. Culture is a sedimented kind of thing because it gets filtered out. The changes is a filtering process. Let us do things in a different way. And that is happening. That is happening all the time. It is happening all the time, whether we are conscious of it or not. Okay, even old vegetables which I might have loved during my childhood, they're disappearing from the market. They're no more productive. It is not that I will stop taking vegetables. Okay, now this is where when we talk about folk is okay, folklore and other things is okay, folk, because you treat it as if it is static, it is out there. You see, and we need to come out of that. We need to come out of that, and we should look at diverse cultural formations. See, therefore, each community, whether isolated or mainstream or whatever, you know, they are also cultures, they are also changing. And I don't also propose a historical study of that. Let us look at their, see, we obviously will bring past and present somewhere, in some form. But do these things that were being done in the past, in the absence, look at this. I'm saying that a girl in most of the tribal societies in Northeast, there is no rape. There is no rape. Okay. Now, why there is no rape? There are no law books written and kept there how a person should be punished. There is no judge, no courtroom. Because social life is encoded somewhere. See, this girl is not yet a woman. Even she cannot be proposed. That will be a violation. And everybody should know. See, we have created institutions where you find that the book itself is a visual aspect. You don't have to read and interpret. Therefore, it is giving us some kind of a theory. It is also providing us do's and do nots are the tools to understand that. And that is where cultural predicament is important, because cultural predicament is the processes and the habits. What are the processes that have to be followed and what the habits you need to have? Like there are so many concepts, because I can confidently talk about Northeast cultures because I know about them. There are so many things like conflict resolution is another concept. Say, how do they actually resolve conflicts? Yes.
Thank you, sir. In case you have any question, kindly post them in the chat box.
I think there are.
Yeah, there are a few questions. Uh, so we have question from Mr. Ajay Kumar. Uh, Sir, let me put it in front of you. He says that how in a micro family, according to oral tradition, in the premises of modern globalized premises, it will work. The old generation is away from their family. What will be the future of the oral tradition?
There is no future. You see, traditions will keep on continuing because traditions, well, there are so many things about traditions. As we say, there is a continuity of traditions. I'll just give you one example. I don't talk about this micro family displacement. Children have grown up living in the cities and old parents there, and after they die, the traditions will die. It is not like that. See, nowadays, parental sraths are done through virtual media, virtual platforms. The children are sitting there in a US or a UK. They outsource the work to a pandit, and he does and shows it, and also ask them to perform whatever they have to do. They have to sit before a computer and do it. And it happened in front of me, but I was witness to that. One of my friend's daughter was getting engaged. The boy was in the state. Sorry, the boy was here. The girl was in the states. Okay, and the engagement took place. The Brahmins came. They were doing their job, and whatever that has to be done, that is being done. And now that is the new form of cultural practice. You see, but culture is continuing. That the death rituals, other things are not actually stopping or not disappearing. We are doing that, and we are doing through the virtual media.
So we have a question related to this as well from Raina Bhuval. She says, in one of your last lectures in our department, you said that folklore in India is limited to collection and digitization of folk items. So after the questions that you have raised in today's session, aren't upcoming folklorists hand-tied as far as incorporation of new theoretical techniques are concerned?
No, there are two different things actually. I think I might have been misunderstood. What I was talking about in my last lecture, if I remember, that commodification of cultures.
True.
I was talking about commodification of cultures. And there are a lot of things, people copy things, they are not original, produce elsewhere, and sold in the name of, artifacts, coming from this community, that community, handicraft, this thing, that thing. That is where I gave the example. One of the important cultural products of the Nagas is Naga salt. It is actually being produced in Guwahati, not in Nagaland. And similarly, this gamcha, which is a very, very culturally very important thing about Assamese. Whenever a guest visits, they give a gamcha. That is an honor. And those gamchas are no longer produced in Assam. They are they are produced in Madras, Chennai. Okay, now this is what I was talking about, commodification of cultures. That is one. There is another thing that is also happening, commodification of cultures like traditional folk dances. Now you will find there are many troops that are coming up and which are supposed to be very ritual origin. These folk dances have ritual origins. Like you take Assamese Bihu, which was supposed to be done at a different cycles, agricultural cycles. Now they are done at any time. You see, therefore, from its cultural origin and objective, it has moved to entertainment. There is a seat, the same people dancing and all these things. Therefore, this is entertainment. See, nobody used to pay to a village troupe, which they think that they will just want to enjoy at the end of the harvest or something like that. And now you have to, but it has created some opportunities for others because there are trainers now, there are teachers, masters, which was done earlier without any money or investment. Now people are getting admitted to be a dancer. And after that, because they have a possibility of commercially making that money.
True.
Now,
True.
this is where the folk is changing,
Hmm.
not getting lost. It is changing.
Changing.
And it would be very interesting actually for folklorists to study this, the changing forms of cultural artifacts or whatever, or formations of performing arts, whatever. That this will be very interesting actually to study this.
So we have, thanks for this answer. Uh, Now we have like two more questions. One from Professor Patnaik itself.
Mhm.
Uh, what is your view on the customary laws, which the ethnic communities believe that they are guided by that? Do you think a set of rules are imposed on them?
Now, there are two things. Actually, ethnic laws sometimes are exploited because people try to take some kind of concession on in the name of ethnic laws. Once you have become part of a modern state, see, you are bestowed upon what is called rights. See, you are a citizen, you have rights. When we talk about the customary laws and the customs and the practices and all that, that was not a state. That was a community living in some village. Maybe you have a chief and all that. And you are not actually living in a space where other communities are living, where other laws are also conflicting with your laws. See, you are living in a particular geography, a homogeneous community having the same kind of clan system, maybe the same language and everything. Now, state is a very big space. See, there are different communities, different people come together and all that. And there is a possibility that there will be a class of customary laws, number one. There will be also a conflict between the state laws and the customary laws. Okay, it is not that Indian state doesn't accommodate some of the cultural practices, like allowing tribes to have some partial hunting or gathering of firewood and other things from reserves, national parks and reserves. It is accommodating because to some extent they can, exploit the resources there, which is traditionally it was their full right. See, but with the new laws and all these preservation, conservation, all these laws, forest laws and all these things, that has been constrained. That has been constrained. Now, this is where there has to be a kind of a mutual give and take. But to me, for a modern state, because people have not remained the same, they still carry that because this is good enough. This this is good enough for cultural politics and identity politics. See, look at because I am from Northeast. You see, people say like this to me, or I am from this. I have these problems. Sometimes it helps a person to pretend that I do not know. See, even if I understand Hindi, I will say, you see, I am not a non-Hindi speaking person. I don't know. I don't know Hindi. What you are saying. That is very fair because you can make that claim. Yeah. Therefore, these there is a, when customary law, anything law, legal, there is always a possibility of conflict. Now, then you have to decide which law should prevail. When two laws come into conflict, which law will prevail? See, child marriage is practiced most part of India. There is no concept of a child marriage among the tribals. They can marry a widow, they can marry an elderly woman, they can marry a younger woman. There is nothing. Marriage is altogether different concept among tribals. See, and the same thing may not happen in other cultures. See, this is where we have to draw a line between customary law and this thing. For me, actually, somewhere there has to be some review because the High Court of Guwahati is actually compiling the customary laws of tribes. because they are, once they are recorded, it is better to refine them. As long as, because legal documents need to be recorded, they cannot be verbal and oral. So once that is done, things will improve, I guess.
Thank you, sir. One last question. Um, this is from Pooja. Sir, when thinking about the linearity and circularity of memory, memory-based and written cultures, um, how do we, just a minute. Yeah. When thinking about the linearity and circularity of memory-based and written cultures, how do we negotiate the aspect that the linearity results in, so to say, better accumulation of data points, while in circularity there is constant fading away of some material?
No, I don't think you see. What I see asked, I think what she is saying is, I didn't use that concept in that sense. What I'm saying is, as we use this expression that traditions are handed down from generation to generation, or folk tale is always a retelling of the same. See, because it has been told by somebody, then somebody listens and repeats it. Now, as because there is a generational gap from older generation to younger generation, therefore memory moves in circles. Okay. In a written culture, what happens? We know about the time period, this thing, that thing, and the movement of written cultural practices, as because they are recorded, there is a linearity because of a timescape like this. Okay, just to give you an example, at some stage when Darwin came up, some of the anthropologists actually talked about evolutionary anthropology, that cultures are also like humans have evolved and they have come through evolution process. Cultures also have evolved and there is a evolutionary method to study cultures. That's fair enough because everything evolves, so you can have. But the main aspect was because biological evolution and cultural evolution, they may be two different things. They may be two different things. Now, this is where what happens when you talk about the evolutionary theory. If I am talking about linearity, it is not handed down from generation to generation. It has come from Darwin to the post-Darwinian thinkers. That's fine. But it's not same as in culture from generation to generation. Okay, this is a historical inheritance. The first one is a cultural inheritance. This is a historical inheritance. We know when Darwin was there, we know what he evolved and what post-Darwinians did. Now, therefore, this is the difference actually between linearity and circularity.
Right.
Okay. Therefore, in circular movement, what happens to knowledge? Where you have to depend mostly on memory. And in case of linear things, it recorded, archived in a library, these things, that thing, you have all these things. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So there's one last question for
I
the
think
day.
this should be the last one.
Yeah, for sure, sir. Um, there's one question by Rohan. He asks, what might be the ways available to a folklorist to locate moments of breaks or ruptures, for instance, in storytelling traditions, when the only evidence available is the testimony of a living individual? How do you see the work of subaltern school of methodological insights to get around this?
See, I want to go to subalterns because I'm not comfortable with those kind of theories. Anyway, I will say yes. You are talking about primarily you are talking about the folk tales, which are only with the last generation. After that, maybe it will not go anywhere. And that is where precisely the work of the folklorist starts, because the folklorist has to collect this. You know, your field study is a collection of material and you keep on collecting. It is not possible that you will collect all the folk tales of a particular culture or any kind of folk products. You cannot collect and preserve them. But some of these could be collected and people are still collecting. There is no problem. But I have one problem is that because they may be presented in the language of the storyteller, and sometimes they are also translated. And there is a possibility of cultural loss in the translations. Therefore, it needs the folklorist, whoever translates from the field, actually has to be a very skilled translator, because we must have to understand the nuances of the um, uh, you know original culture, and translating it in a language for the target people, target readers. Therefore, this skill, I think, folklore. I think there was a course used to be taught in anthropological linguistics. Similarly, folklore should add a course on translation of the folk, where there are a lot of cultural specific words that cannot be translated, and therefore you have to create a context so that the meaning will be understandable. Okay, you cannot go on giving one page story and you give 3 pages glossary, and which is not good enough. Therefore, I think folklore department should start, I think, a course on translation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for enlightening us on so many things in just one lecture. Thank you very
uh,
much for your time, for your critical insights, and for making us rich in
I
the
don't know
entire
whether
session.
I have made you rich or not.
Thank you, sir. So, on behalf of the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, it was a pleasure to have you. And indeed, we are grateful to you for your time, for your insights. And
Thank
I'd
you.
like to extend my thankfulness to everyone who could join us today. Thank you to all the participants, to all the research scholars, to our experts. Heartfelt thanks to Professor Patnaik for arranging these series of webinars, and Dr. Venkat for all the technical aspects that you have attached and groomed us with. Thank you very much. Uh, Over to you, sir.